Or okay. Hello and formally welcome to everybody joining us. My name is Jonathan Cohn. I'm the policy director with Progressive Mass. We're happy to have you joining us, whether this is your first event with us or if you've been here for many a time before. And we'll be talking tonight about decarceration and particularly the efforts of preventing the gross expansion of prison construction in Massachusetts, particularly the proposal of expanding the Middlesex Women's Prison, as well as all of the better things that we could be doing to improve people's well-being, bring them home, and imagine a better vision of public safety and community safety for all. As we were thinking about events to do in this spring forward policy series, I thought that wanted to make sure we invited one of my favorite speakers in the Massachusetts activist scene, Mallory Hanora from Families for Justice is Healing, who does amazing advocacy work, especially around on this issue that we'll be talking about tonight. So Mallory, I'm going to hand it over to you for to share your slides, introduce yourself, and take it away. And then just
Awesome.
a quick note for folks, what we'll do is Mallory will present. During Mallory's presentation, if you have questions, drop them in the chat, but we'll do a formal Q&A session at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, John, and Progressive Mass. I'm super honored to be here. We're incredibly grateful for Progressive Mass's support, and particularly for centering the jail and prison construction moratorium and joining us in vocal opposition to Governor Healey's plan to build a $360 million women's prison in our state. Lucky to have you all here on a weeknight, and many familiar faces, including some of our founders and team, are here. Some volunteers with our campaign are here, so we're super grateful that you came. And the presentation is going to kind of cover everything. So if you're brand new and you don't know much about the $360 million women's prison plan, I'm going to give you all those details. If you've been organizing with the Free Her campaign for a while, we'll talk about sort of what's happening in this moment and how we can continue to build power. So thank you again. So we are Families for Justice as Healing. I'm the co-director. Our mission is to end the incarceration of women and girls. We're founded by my boss and mentor, Andrea James, and I think she's on the call tonight with some of our other founders, Taz and Sister Virginia, all incarcerated together in federal prison in Connecticut. So we are founded by incarcerated women, organizing to take care of each other, organizing to free each other. Andrea brought that work home to Roxbury, and we continue to do that organizing here. Our headquarters is in Roxbury. She went on to found the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, and us at EFTA are proud members of the National Council. We continue to be led by incarcerated women, and for us, that includes women in MCI-Framingham, who we are in daily communication with, as well as formerly incarcerated women. We have a powerful cohort of formerly incarcerated leaders leading our organizing, and women with incarcerated loved ones. We do policy and litigation work, and that's going to be my main focus tonight, is talking about that angle and how we can push the jail and prison moratorium as one strategy to stop the $360 million women's prison, and we do a lot else. Some of you have volunteered with the Free Her campaign. That's our distributed organizing campaign, which some of you are used to the way that works for candidates. It includes door knocking, phone banking, tabling, canvassing. But through the Free Her campaign, we've actually had thousands, tens of thousands of conversations, really, with Massachusetts residents about what else is possible here besides prison construction. And what else is possible for us is the work that we call Reimagining Communities, and that's led by my incredible co-director, Sashi James, and our team of shifters doing on-the-ground organizing, creating what different looks like, building community-led infrastructure and solutions that protect our people from criminalization and incarceration and welcome people home, to help heal from the economic devastation of incarceration, as well as the harm and trauma. So that's reimagining communities, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like, because when people say, what else could we do besides prison construction, we have the answers to that. First, I just want to give some background about MCI-Framingham. It's located in Framingham. It's on 99 Loring Drive. It is our only state prison for women in Massachusetts. It has an average daily population of 219, and actually, I think the DOC institutional fact card came out in January and it said 226, but it's just over 200 women. And that includes pretrial women from Middlesex County who have not been convicted of anything yet. So if we allowed women to be free to fight their case as they should be, Many women are incarcerated pretrial because they can't afford their bail or because of technical violations of pretrial probation, which are usually a result of poverty, and difficulty meeting those conditions because of not having money to get where you need to go, not having childcare, etc. If we just released pretrial women, we would decarcerate MCI-Framingham by 25%. So we really need to be focusing on how small of a group of women we really are talking about, and that there are existing pathways and strategies to reduce this population even further. So there are county sentenced women from Middlesex County who are incarcerated at MCI Framingham and about 150 state sentenced women. It was originally built in the 1870s, which makes MCI Framingham the oldest operating women's prison in the United States. However, I just want to point out that the state has taken that and is using it as justification to do $360 million of construction. So I want to be clear that there is one single building on the Framingham property that is still being used that was built in the 1870s. It's called the Old Administrative Building. It is where some programming is held. And as people know, there is very, very limited programming anyway available at MCI Framingham. And that is some of that is happening in the old administrative building. It is old. It absolutely is, not up to the standard of what we should expect. And at the same time, the rest of the property has buildings that were added in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and that is on par with the buildings and the conditions across the rest of the DOC. So we like to emphasize that long before we knew of the proposal to build a $360 million women's prison, directly impacted women were already organizing about the conditions that incarcerated women were facing. And that wasn't just the age of the building. That's things like rodents and mold, things that are really about the daily upkeep and maintenance that the DOC should be managing and consistently fails to do. So I just want to talk about who is in MCI Framingham. It's important to name that here and across the country, the overwhelming majority of incarcerated women are survivors of domestic and sexual violence, and that, in fact, experiencing violence is a root cause of incarceration of women. And so when we're thinking about what women are experiencing, they're being re-traumatized by their incarceration. Super important to note that more than 70% of women at MCI Framingham are mothers, and many are grandmothers who have been separated from their children and their grandchildren. Women inside MCI Framingham have been criminalized for their drug use. Women are struggling with unmet mental health needs and unaddressed trauma. And women experiencing poverty have been criminalized for their survival. And they had unstable housing prior to incarceration. And that is one of the number one reasons that we're hearing from the directly impacted women that we experience with that unsafe and unstable housing was a leading cause of women's entanglement in the criminal legal system. So, what are women experiencing at MCI Framingham? Being referred to as inmate, as state property, as a number, being dehumanized in that way, and constant and regular coercion, physical, mental, or sexual abuse by guards, constant invasive surveillance, including during showers and while sleeping. And the shower curtain is an issue that has continued to come up over and over and over again. And it is a daily indignity that women are showering with a curtain that is only opaque in the middle. So it's clear at the top and clear at the bottom. And depending on your height, a part of your body is exposed to guards who are surveilling you while you're showering. And they refuse to change it because they say that this shower curtain lives up to PREA standards and therefore they don't need to change it. One of our supporters, who also happens to be a pen pal of a woman inside MCI Framingham, recently wrote a letter to the editor to the Metro West Daily News and said, "What good is $360 million of prison construction if women are denied the dignity of an $8 shower curtain?" And I just think that sums up what we're talking about, which is the violent and dehumanizing culture of prison in general, and specifically the Massachusetts Department of Correction. And that's something that physical construction is not going to change. Women are also enduring dehumanizing strip searches, shackling, confinement, and turtle suits, which is, if my incredible colleague Miss Angie was here, would talk to you about when women do have mental health crisis, when they're incarcerated, they are restricted physically in these awful suits in addition to being surveilled. But I do want to say that when women come together and when women are supported outside, and that solidarity, that outside solidarity happens, that change can happen too. And that because of the organizing that incarcerated women have been leading and we have been echoing and amplifying at Families for Justice as Healing, raising this in every single meeting that we've had, that women were being strip searched after Zoom meetings with their attorney, like just in a room with a computer. They had to be stripped naked after they had an attorney visit. And in fact, women who we were organizing to free through clemency and other means were not even willing to meet with their attorney because they did not want to experience that indignity. We brought that up over and over again, and we're proud to share that because of the courage of incarcerated women, the Department of Correction has officially changed that policy. And women are no longer being strip searched, at least after attorney visits, Zoom visits. So we're continuing to organize to end all strip searches, of course, but this small step was actually massive in women being able to access the legal representation that they deserve and not have to be stripped naked in order to do it. So I just want to raise that as an example of what we can do together to address conditions immediately as we are in a longer term struggle for freedom and dignity. There is terrible mental and physical health care. Recently, a woman who I love very much and have been communicating with for many years detailed for me step by step her experience being transferred to the Shattuck for healthcare that she needed for a chronic illness that she has. It was a 13-hour ordeal. She was shackled for nearly all of that time, and unable to eat because they didn't offer her food that was conducive with her GI illness. It was harrowing, and I don't want to sensationalize anything, but I just want to sort of underscore the hour by hour experiences that women are going through inside MCI-Framingham that, again, have nothing to do with the physical structure of the building. And there is an abhorrent lack of meaningful and modern relevant programming. So all of these things together remind us what incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women teach us every day, which is that there is no such thing as a good prison or a safe prison, a trauma-informed prison, or a gender-responsive prison. A prison is a prison is a prison. So what's going on with the $360 million women's prison project in Massachusetts? So we actually uncovered this plan all the way back under the Baker administration when it was slated to cost $50 million. No incarcerated women or formerly incarcerated women were ever included in the planning or in any part of the process under the Baker administration. And then in June of 2025, Governor Healey announced that this plan now is going to cost $360 million, and there's very little information in the press release. There's been very little public information since then. Most of the information that we have is because of constant records requests that we have to do. And as you know, because you're a supporter or you're down with progressive mass, you know that we have some of the worst public records laws in the entire United States. But to kind of put a fine point on when we talk about lack of engagement, what we mean, incarcerated women were not even notified before this press release went out. In fact, Families for Justice as Healing mailed in Governor Healey's press release into Framingham, which is how women found out that there had been this massive announcement about where they are incarcerated. So they were never included in the process in the design phase, and they still largely haven't been, although we've heard a rumor that DOC has put an anonymous survey on their tablets now about what it is that they need. So the basics of the plan are that it's scheduled to take 6 to 8 years, and it includes demolition, and part of that demolition started in October 2025. It's not officially included in this project because it's an additional cost, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But 2 buildings were demolished in October 2025, and the plan is to build a brand new building on top of where those buildings were demolished. There's massive renovations planned that far exceed the scope of necessary repairs. And there's a construction plan of 2 totally new buildings, each costing more than $60 million. So this is a massive, incredibly expensive long-term plan. And I just want folks to imagine for a second what it would be like to live on a construction site for 6 to 8 years. Folks that are living in cities, or maybe next door they are building a condo building, the constant banging and shaking that you go through for a short period of time when your neighbors are getting construction. We're talking about years and years and years of living through that on the MCI-Framingham property. And just to give you a visual, this comes from one of the many, many records requests that we have done to try to get an understanding of what's even happening and the projected scope of this project. As you can see, the timeline's been entirely redacted. That's what the black box is on the top. And we regularly get records requests that are much more redacted than this particular slide. But as you can see, there's lots of different phases of this project. And some of them could actually be considered necessary repairs, right? Like part 1.1 is electrification and roofing. If roofing needs repaired, like these are totally understandable things that we've never opposed, right? These are necessary repairs for the well-being of incarcerated women. And then we have things that totally go beyond that. Like I want to point out, they're calling the programming building a quote unquote community wellness and learning center. That is an affront to what directly impacted women have been calling out for and demanding in our communities, not behind layers of razor wire, right? Not behind a prison wall. That actually we need community wellness and learning centers in our communities to prevent criminalization and incarceration in the first place. Women should not have to be prosecuted and incarcerated in order to access these resources. They're also calling the healthcare building a quote unquote care and treatment center. So it's just like this Orwellian language, right? This co-optation of what the movement has actually been asking for investment in a community now all of a sudden is appearing as part of a massive prison construction project. So as you can see, it's super extensive. If you want another way to, if you're a visual person, this is the MCI-Framingham property here. I won't go into too much detail because I have a lot to share. But I just wanted you to get a sense of everything that's X'd out in red that has to be demolished. So lots of demolition. You can see the buildings with the gray hash marks. Those are the ones that have already been demolished. But one thing I do want to point out is you see the building in the sort of the left-hand side. It's called Laurel. That's considered the quote unquote honor cottage. That is the one place on the Framingham property where women, if they could choose to live there, would want to live there. Of course, they don't want to be incarcerated, but that is the best place to live on the campus, and that is the buildings. Are y'all able to see the slides?
I'm
Maybe.
able to see the slides. I think somebody else did. Let me try to troubleshoot.
Okay, should I try to stop sharing and start again? Let me try that. I'm so sorry. Let me try that. And also, y'all are welcome to have these. So let me get a link. I'm gonna put a link too, so just in case.
Yeah,
Uh,
actually, yeah, if you're dropping a link, that would be great because most people seem to be able to see the slides. It might be a tech
okay.
glitch for one or two, but then people can follow along.
Okay, amazing. So there's the link. You can also follow, play along at home if that's better for folks. All right. I know I'm talking a lot. Giving a lot of information, so thank you for hanging in there with me. Um, Anyways, I was just making the point that Laurel is the place where women feel this, if it, the best about living. That's where they would want to live if they had to live in Framingham, and they're planning to demolish it. And it's just like, for me, that just sticks out as there's this huge disconnect between what women are actually going through, what women want and need, and then like the plans of this project. And then here you can see the replacement community wellness and learning center. That's the AKA the new programming building, and then the new healthcare building there. Again, each one of those buildings costing $60 million. So just one I want to emphasize to you, if your legislator is telling you that quote unquote nothing has been decided yet, or this might not be happening, or this is still in progress, this has been in progress for a very long time, for years. The state has spent $5 million already in the planning and design phase of this project, and clearly somebody is deciding something, and we're not a part of any of that. Not taxpayers, not incarcerated women, not formerly incarcerated women. So this project is going to happen unless we stop it. And here's sort of like the most updated cost estimate that I can find through public records requests. You can see the total is 200, sorry, I can't even, it's at the end of the day, $245.3 million. That doesn't equal 360, so that's likely not including some of the architecture contract costs. It might not be including the construction manager cost. I don't know where these numbers are coming from. I don't know anything about how they got to these estimates. All of this is not justified, but I just wanted to show you that clearly somebody's doing some financial math about something and putting aside some resources for this construction to happen. So, what are some of our major concerns? First and foremost, the well-being of our sisters inside. As I've tried to emphasize, there's no physical renovations that can repair the culture of the Department of Corrections. Women are already experiencing abuse and neglect. They are not getting the mental or physical health care that they deserve. They're already experiencing family separation Often trauma is part of the root cause of incarceration. They're being re-traumatized by their incarceration. And for those sisters that were surviving poverty, when they are released from prison, it is even more difficult for them to meet their survival needs like employment and housing. The cost is extreme. It's unjustifiable. As I mentioned, we have no explanation. It is an excessive cost for a very small number of women, something to the tune of we could just give each woman inside MCI Framingham $1.6 million, dollars, or we could build this prison. It is astronomical in terms of its expense and compared to the very small population of women that we incarcerate in state prison here. And there's been not a lot of transparency on the process. So just as a reminder for folks, this is from the capital budget, not the operating budget. And so when we have debt spending, we pay interest on that. So there's also been no discussion of on top of the actual construction cost, how much are we paying in interest on this? And one more thing I want to emphasize, this is just the capital portion. The DOC operating budget is almost $1 billion dollars, and it costs $220,000 a year to incarcerate one woman in MCI Framingham. So just take a second and elaborate in the chat on what we could get for women if we were spending $220,000 a year on women. I mean, that's a mortgage. We could send her to Harvard. We could pay for daycare. Like, this is an outrageous cost to incarcerate women and only cause further harm. I think it's been pretty clear that there has not been a lot of transparency about this at any point. A lot of the information we have is because we've done a lot of records requests and try to share as much information we can. We're often finding that when we're sharing this information, we know more than legislators. I'm sending screen caps to legislators about that I'm seeing from public records requests. So it's been really difficult to get even basic information about this project. We are very deeply and gravely concerned that a $360 million women's prison project is going to increase the incarceration of women. There's an adage that I'm sure many of you are familiar with is if they build it, they will fill it. And I want to point out that that's not just true about cells. It's also true that our communities have been stripped of so many resources, and we're in a financial crisis where there's things that are being defunded that we desperately need. That if there is a shiny new medical building that is built, it is going to incentivize prosecutors and judges to decide to hold women that they might otherwise release if community resources were actually available, right? And we've seen that happen in other jurisdictions. We've seen a similar project, for example, in Ireland, where they built a very similarly themed project that was branded and billed in a similar way, and it actually is overcrowded now because they have sent more women to the quote unquote nice prison. So if anybody has been in district court with our sisters or anyone, we know that there is not enough beds for people. We know that there's not enough affordable housing. There's not enough places for people to live. People are being criminalized for homelessness. So we are very fearful that if there is a place available that has this nice name, that prosecutors are going to be wanting to send women there, that judges are going to agree to send women there, and that this is going to, again, increase incarceration, specifically for drug use and mental health, which we know does not work. So one of our forms of advocacy is we have over 200 public health professionals that signed a letter opposing this project, saying that dignified, ethical, effective treatment actually cannot happen in settings of incarceration, right? That's inherently coercive, that you're separated from your support system, and in fact, you're more likely to overdose when you've been released from incarceration. So for all of these reasons, we are continuing to oppose new construction. There's also environmental issues. This area of Framingham has had environmental justice issues over the years, where the various buildings and businesses in that area having toxins that have affected the community. There are issues of toxic hazards at MCI Framingham. The two buildings that were demolished in the fall were known to have asbestos and lead paint by the DOC. Women were sent in to, excuse me, to clean those buildings out before they were demolished. And they came out of the build. They were sent in as part of a work crew. And, women are paid very, very, very little, just cents an hour to work. And they were sent in with no PPE. They came out with red, watery eyes, burning lungs, headaches, and they wrote to us right away about this. And we partnered with PLS to raise this with the administration. Like, why are you sending women and DOC staff into buildings that you know to be contaminated with toxins? And luckily, they did not send any more women in after that initial work crew. And in fact, they had to hire a company that they sent in hazmat suits to clean out those two buildings. But I just wanted to name that because if this is what they're doing in the very first initial stages of this process, how can we possibly trust them to take care of women over 6 to 8 years on an active construction site? We simply don't. DOC is known to mismanage construction projects like this. Multiple buildings across the DOC are in states of disrepair because of deferred maintenance. Like, we just don't trust them to be able to manage this project safely and effectively. Um, and also have women have written to us about, okay, we tore down these buildings, right? They tore them down into the ground and all they did was put gravel over top of them. So if there's asbestos and lead paint and tiny particles, like, is that in the soil? Is that in the groundwater? Like, what's going on? And they believe that several of the other cottages they're not currently living in also have these environmental issues, and they're worried about how they're going to affect women long term and affect neighbors to the property. I also just want to point out that the Department of Correction has a 287G contract to collaborate with ICE. We are the only Democratic state, like a Democratic state with a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature, to have a statewide contract with ICE. So ICE is known to be a violent, rogue, racist agency, right? Collaborating with the Department of Corrections, which the legislature cannot seem to hold accountable to follow the law. This governor hasn't chosen to hold accountable to follow the law. We also consider to be a rogue and violent agency. These should not be partnering. Like, this is not a good partner. We do not want our state working with ICE at all, period. We should not be legitimizing the Gestapo. We also should not be inviting ICE presence into communities by having people come be picked up immediately from the prison. And that's happened to our members who had to fight in indefinite ICE detention, ended up winning their immigration cases, finally being reunited with their children. And that being stolen right from the prison wouldn't have happened if this contract didn't exist. So for all of these many reasons, I think many of you are organizing against ICE presence in your own communities. You're organizing for things like improving the PROTECT Act to actually make it substantive and protect communities. But if we're giving more capital dollars to this agency that's collaborating with ICE, what does that mean? We don't have any evidence that this would be used to detain immigrant women, but that's certainly possible under this type of contract. And just in general, we need to just connect the dots between expanding incarceration, increasing mass incarceration, and the deportation machine as being deeply related, right? Two pieces of the same puzzle of oppression and repression of our communities. So, not the time to be doing prison construction in the era of the Trump regime. So, what are incarcerated women saying themselves? We Families for Justice as Healing collaborated with Boston College Law School Civil Rights Clinic. And student attorneys did private and confidential interviews and engagement with 32 incarcerated women, which is the most extensive dialogue about the $360 million women's prison that has happened, done by anybody. And we just wanted to share what came out of those conversations. So 75% of the women who were interviewed outright opposed this project, and 84% of women expressed serious concerns about the project proceeding as planned. 97%. So almost everybody had something to say about programming being woefully inadequate, not preparing women to come home to the community, and also not modern and frankly deeply sexist. That the industries and programming that was available to women was not only more limited than the men, but their industry is sewing and hair and culinary, not reflective of industries that women want to be part of in 2026. And 88% of women brought up the poor quality, the substandard quality of healthcare that's provided by the private contractor, VitalCore. And I think something that's important to point out is that you can build a $60 million quote unquote healthcare building at MCI-Framingham. VitalCore is still going to run it. the same private prison profiteering company is going to manage healthcare in the new building. So it's not going to be a cultural shift. It's not going to improve the quality of the care, even if it's in a different space. So just, I will share this link in the chat in just a moment. But I really, really, really strongly encourage everyone, and I'm sure John could probably send out some stuff as a follow-up, but please take a moment to read this report when you can. It's called Hear Our Voices. Listen to women themselves who have been left out of this conversation, excluded from this conversation. We did not do these interviews. They were done by student attorneys in private and confidential meetings. So this was women, really speaking even without the presence of DOC officers in the room, getting to express what's really going on at MCI-Framingham. And this is what they said about what they actually wanted. They wanted investment in reentry, including housing. So now Families for Justice as Healing is the only organization that provides transportation home from MCI-Framingham. We are going on an almost weekly basis to pick women up and bring them somewhere. And over and over and over again in these emails, women are terrified that they have nowhere to go or nowhere sustainable to go. So women don't know where they're going to come home to, and there's no investment in residential reentry programs for women. That could be an example of something that we could very clearly shift money into instead of prison construction. Women want us to address the classification system. I won't go too deep into this, but the DOC has a way of measuring somebody's quote unquote risk level. And according to the DOC, in the end of 2025, 84% of women at MCI-Framingham qualified based on their own scoring tool to be minimum security. Minimum security women could be held in the community. They do not have to be in a prison setting. They could be in community-based sentencing, community-based programs. And also, why are we building a $360 million medium security prison if most women are qualified as minimum security? Women wanted to end unnecessary strip searches. They got part of that through their organizing already by ending the strip searches after Zoom visits. We're going to keep going on sort of the daily dehumanization of women enduring strip searches. They want improved healthcare and increased access to care in the community because Vital Core is so substandard. They want to improve programming and education access and job training opportunities. One thing I love to bring up with folks is Framingham State is right down the street, and they made this incredibly good decision that if you're from a household that's making less than $85,000 a year, you can get free tuition to Framingham State. Great. Why are women inside MCI-Framingham not going down the street to college? They all make less than $85,000 a year. There's no reason that they cannot go to college. We don't need to bring, college into the prison. Women can be, although we should, if we have to, but women could be going to college in the community. And most of all, they want more pathways to release, including elder and medical parole in the Massachusetts Survivors Act, which would be resentencing for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. So I know I'm saying a lot, but very often, me personally, and FJA is sort of accused as being wild radicals who just want to totally open the doors of the prison and let everybody out right now. Yes, and also there are legal, pragmatic strategies that already exist to safely and wisely decarcerate MCI-Framingham, and I just want to show you a visual. Now, these are numbers based on real data, just to give you sort of a picture or a map about what decarceration could actually look like. So if we start with an average daily population, which was again from 2025, of around 219, again, we would substantially decarcerate MCI-Framingham if we just let people be free to fight their case. During COVID-19, Sheriff Katusian actually let all county sentenced women go into the community to finish serving their sentence. He did it really quietly, but it did happen. There is precedence. So for women that are serving county sentences, i.e., sentences for mostly minor transgressions for less than 2 years, they could be in the community doing programming to heal and advance their life instead of in state prison. At some point, there were 16 civilly committed women at MCI-Framingham. Now, according to the law, women have to have an open case in order to be able to be civilly committed. You can't just be civilly committed. But what we're finding in the reality is that women are catching very minor cases. They're keeping those cases open in order to have them be committed indefinitely. These are women who absolutely and urgently need proper, dignified mental health care. They should not be in prison. They should be accessing care somewhere else. There are going to be 9 women over the next year petitioning the governor for clemency. There's 3 clemency petitions in already that we are actively fighting for. Those women could go home anytime that the Advisory Board of Pardons and the governor feels like looking at their petition, and there are more coming. So that would bring us down to 129. An approximate estimate of women who, by the current statute, qualify for medical parole because of significant illnesses. So they're permanently incapacitated by their significant long-term illnesses. They are not going to get any better. That's about 8 women that would legally qualify for the standard, can and should come home. There's one woman whose whose medical parole petition is pending right now. She had her leg amputated by the DOC 4 years ago, and the DOC has still not provided her a properly fitting prosthetic. This is what we're talking about women who absolutely need to come home right now before we even consider prison construction. That would bring us down to 121. There are second degree lifers who are already parole eligible who have been denied multiple times. I think folks are sort of aware that there's been a slow change on the parole board, and maybe a little bit of a cultural shift happening. But oftentimes people have been denied because of a lack of available programming at MCI-Framingham or a lack of placements in the community. Both of those things could use investment instead of prison construction. These women are already parole eligible. They should be paroled. And that would bring us down to 112. Even if we stopped there, we've cut the population completely in half, by totally reasonable, pragmatic steps that would also save us a lot of money. Why hasn't the DOC, why hasn't this administration done exactly what I'm doing? I have a spreadsheet. I want to go through all of these women's cases. We need to talk about all available pathways home. And then we sort of talked about if we use the DOC's classification system the right way and actually allowed women who should be qualified as minimum to go to minimum placements or into the community, that would bring us down to around 20 women. Now we're $360 million for 20 women. This is an outrageous conversation. And then we could, of course, keep going to really look at what are all alternatives to incarceration. But this is what we want to do. This is what we've always demanded. Our most important demand is who can come home right now? Who should be who should be home? What are all of the available and appropriate release mechanisms? And how do we maximize all of those before we talk about prison construction? Because how can we be planning a footprint? How can we be talking about a bed count if we're not doing this exact process to figure out where people could be instead of prison? So that's the demand. Here's what's going on right now. As I mentioned, the buildings were demolished in the fall of 2025. Regular meetings are continuing to happen. So state employees that our tax dollars are paying are meeting with architects at HDR to continue this process. And then the state is in the final phases of hiring a firm to manage this construction project. So they're going to award a very, very expensive contract to advance this project. So how does that fit with the idea that nothing has been decided yet, right? They're spending our money, they're using state employee time to push this project forward really quickly. So I'm going to give you an opportunity in a second to see how you can email these construction firms directly and say, look, working for the DOC is bad for business. Don't profit off of women's trauma. Don't accept this contract for the construction manager position. And what we've heard is that the DOC is planning to start, the DOC told women that construction was going to start in October of 2027. So this is going to happen unless we stop it. How are we going to stop it? First and foremost, we got to pass the jail and prison construction moratorium. The Senate version and the House version are in Ways and Means right now. This is completely viable and doable. It's already passed in 2021. It should pass again, or 2022, I apologize. And that would pause jail and prison construction for 5 years. It would not stop necessary repairs. So absolutely things that would improve women's day-to-day quality of life could still happen, just not the enormous scope of this expensive project. We need to pass elder and medical parole right now. We have the oldest incarcerated population in the entire United States. We have the highest percentage of people serving life without parole. We absolutely need medical parole to work. It is not working right now. And we need to establish parole review for the oldest and longest serving people in the Department of Correction to just meet this moment, and to prevent an even bigger humanitarian crisis of aging in our prisons in Massachusetts. And we talked about a root cause of incarceration of women specifically being surviving violence, enduring abuse and harm. And in fact, we should ensure that we pass a policy this session to divert survivors from the criminal legal system in the first place and allow alternative sentencing and resentencing for survivors of domestic and sexual violence whose transgression was related directly to the abuse that they were experiencing. There's a bill before Senator Rodriguez in Ways and Means right now that we could pass this session. So these are all super viable. There's momentum behind these bills. There's large support behind these bills. Um, we can pass them this session. And then what are we going to do with a 5-year prison moratorium? I'll share it and I'll end on this and take questions and then share all the links about how you can get involved. What are we going to do? Well, we're already doing it. Sashi and the Reimagining Communities crew is already doing alternatives to incarceration. We're already building community infrastructure. It might be a small scale, but with investment, we could be doing this in many more communities across the Commonwealth. We all know we need housing. We need capital investment in housing, not prison construction. We need healthcare. We don't need to be disinvesting from hospitals. We don't need to be disinvesting from mental health care staff and medical workers. We need consensual, dignified treatment available on demand, not in carceral settings. We need more access to education, from our youngest babies to our oldest folks who want to go to college. We need real investment, real, meaningful, massive investment in reentry so people can rebuild their lives and never return to jail and prison. We need community-based alternatives and not just programs. I just want to share that we have a guaranteed basic income program at Families for Justice as Healing and at the National Council, and Families for Justice as Healing has a guaranteed basic housing program. It's a rental assistance program. It's a small scale, but it's really meaningful. And if we give women money and if we keep women housed, those are alternatives to incarceration because women are punished for surviving poverty. And if we lift women out of poverty, we protect them from punishment. So these are alternatives to incarceration that could absolutely be expanded. These are the solutions that should be invested in, not prison construction. And they're happening right now and they could be expanded. So there's lots of exciting work that we could really pour into and honor and allow to kind of like take root and get bigger instead of really defining the next 5 generations in the Commonwealth to be just more incarceration, just more of the same. So incarcerated women support a prison moratorium, formerly incarcerated women support a prison moratorium, public health experts, clergy and faith leaders, advocates and organizers. And it got cut off, but I wanted specifically for John, I wanted it to be in there that the prison moratorium also happens to be in the Democratic Party platform. So Democrats should do what they said that they were going to do and promised delegates and voters and constituents that they were going to do and pass the prison moratorium. So I'm going to stop there. There's lots of stuff we can do. Oh, but actually, before I take questions, please come to our car rally. I'm about to put all these links in the chat, but it's one of our most beautiful traditions. We drive around South Bay and Framingham and we honk and we decorate our cars beautifully and we just make a lot of noise and send loving vibrations inside to women, and women love it. They know we're coming this year as well. They've emailed me a lot that they're looking forward to it and they just really appreciate feeling the love and knowing they're not forgotten and knowing people out here are fighting for them. And if you happen to be a Framingham resident, we're really building on the ground with Framingham residents who are neighbors to women inside the prison, building that solidarity. Any Metro West residents that want to think about city and local strategies, not just state strategies to stop the prison, please join us on Saturday, May 2nd. For a local meeting to stop the $360 million women's prison, as well as to connect organizing and movement work that's already happening in Framingham and talking about how to connect those dots and strengthen and build power for campaigns that are already moving, including to stop ICE presence in our neighborhoods. And here is the link to our toolkit, which I'll also put in the chat. There's always updated with easy online actions that you can take right away. So I thank you. I went on a little over. I apologize for that, but
No
I'd love
worries.
to take
It was
any questions.
amazing content and just very thorough. But I'll just note that I especially appreciated that graphic showing how to get from the current population down to zero in the real like step-by-step way that makes it that shows that that type of decarceration isn't some like fantastical idea, but actually something like concrete by policies that that like exist in other places often or are already being discussed in the state and can get us all the way down, making the $360 million even more obscene. Um, so before we do Q&A, can I get a round of Zoom applause for Mallory? But I'd say if folks have questions, drop them in the chat, or you can use the hand raise function and just ask your question directly. Not a question, but saw somebody talking about how amazing you are, so I'll elevate that from the chat. One thing, this is more of a comment about something that you noted. It just seems so obscene to me that they were doing strip searches after Zoom like visits, as though people are handing contraband through a computer.
Totally, totally obscene and ridiculous. And their justification was because it ha happens in a certain area of the prison that then that meant that these searches had to be mandatory. But they got embarrassed because they got their card pulled. And we saw, we demanded these meetings. We continue to demand them. And the reason is because we truly believe in uplifting what women inside are saying. So women were raising that with us. In fact, uh, there's a woman that clemency petition is pending right now, and she's like almost she is in a lot of pain. She's an elder and she's disabled, and it's very difficult for her to even type on the tablet or hold a pen or a pencil to write. But somehow she managed to communicate with me that she's like, look, I don't even think I can go through this process because I'm not willing to hoist myself out of my wheelchair to be strip searched to talk to my attorneys. And her incredible student attorneys just called her on the unit, and she did her whole clemency petition on the phone on the unit because she didn't want the indignity as an elder to be strip searched. So we told that story over and over and over again as a reflection, first of all, to like, let's meet our material needs of our sisters inside. Let's change shitty policies. And let's underscore, like, what is the, like, this is who the DOC is, right? Like, what are you talking about? You're going to transform Framingham. You're going to reimagine Framingham, which they stole from us. No, you're going to have these same exact punitive, dehumanizing policies. You're just going to have it in a building that you painted, lavender instead of whatever, institutional gray.
It reminds me of the great quote that I always liked about how every system is perfectly designed for the results that it gets. And if there's no actual, like, just building the size of it and having every other aspect of that still in place, run by the same people, not producing any not producing any better outcome. One thing for folks who'd be interested in this, probably in your action guide, if people wanted to help, like with putting pressure behind clemency cases, how do they help?
Great question. Okay, so a couple of things. I'm gonna just open the toolkit so you can kind of like get a sense of what it looks like if you haven't used it before. But we take this very seriously. We update it all the time. So it's just a simple menu, and we can promise that anything on here is like currently relevant if you have the time to do it. Um, but there's always options and opportunities in addition to that. So like if you see this link here, there's events and ways to get involved. And you can always contact me if you want to get more involved. But one of the things that we're also offering is we have these absolutely gorgeous postcards. This art here was done by our sister Pat Olson, who's working on our clemency petition right now. So it's the artist inside MCI-Framingham, who we dearly love. She did some other art for us, and we made postcards. And we're offering, like, if your church group or synagogue or knitting circle or academic department wants to have an event where folks come together and fill out postcards to uplift women's names to the Advisory Board of Pardons, we can help you coordinate to send letters and communication to amplify these names with both the Advisory Board of Pardons and the governor. So there's lots of ways that we're trying to build that power, and we just want to normalize clemency, right? Clemency should be a part of any functional criminal legal system. We should have a mechanism for relief. We should have a mechanism for mercy, and it shouldn't just be for powerful people who can buy it, right? It should be for people who are enduring immense suffering, who have experienced extreme discrimination, and injustice in their underlying cases. So yes, you can join us in things like a postcard campaign. And then also I just want to point out that again, while we're moving towards our longer term goals, we always want to make sure we're like centering our sisters inside. So one of our traditions is doing a canteen drive. So that's going to be launching on Monday, May 4th. And again, we'll put how to be all over our social media. It'll be on our toolkit, but that's a way that you can help a sister meet her material needs, help her get food that she needs, help her get hygiene products. You can put $20 directly on her canteen. And that'll really mean so much to her. Help her get stamps for things that she needs to send and write out. So that's like another opportunity, and you can spread the word to help us like get as much money as we can to women directly inside the prison. There's always opportunities. Every single week we phone bank. Most weekends a month we go somewhere and canvas or table. And then some folks have been really generous in their organizing, like asking for meetings with their legislator, like and tapping us in so we can um educate more legislators about this who might have less of an idea or who might be sort of like buying the party line that this isn't happening or it's still in the deciding phase. Oh, and one other thing. I also just wanted if you all because you never know who's in the room, but we've been pushing these companies. I just want to be clear, like these companies are going to make mad money from this contract to build this prison. Um, it is the W.T. Rich Company. They have a joint proposal with the Fontaine brothers. And we don't know if they've awarded this contract yet because they won't tell us until they already do it. So we know that they've applied, but we don't know. We want to convince them not to take it if it's offered to them. The Dimeo Company, the Bond Building Company, and Suffolk Construction. So if you happen to know anyone at these companies, definitely be like, again, this is bad for business. Don't contribute to generational harm in our communities. Build up people, not prisons. Or if you know a legislator that has, if this company is in your district and you want to look it up and see, okay, who's the state rep or senator that might know this company or any ways of just like kind of putting pressure on businesses to say, look, don't profit off of the suffering of women and their families. Build something else that our communities need. We want you to get those capital contracts, but we want you to get them for housing and for community centers and healthcare centers, not for prison construction. So these are all like if legislative advocacy is not your jam and you want to do some like pushing on public companies, you can. And then really, if mutual aid is more your thing, we do regular court support. We go to parole hearings for women for almost all of them at this point. And like I said, at this point, we're picking up women from Framingham almost every single week. We put together welcome home packages. So if direct care of community members is something that you're interested, we could definitely talk about how to kind of make a connection and build some trust to be able to do that. And of course, we accept donations to be able to afford to put all that stuff together as well. So lots of ways to get involved. Just whatever your lane is, whatever you're passionate about, or we'd love to have you plug in.
And I love that. I'll give a shout out for that. That like any different type of thing that one might want to do, there's a way to do it. Which really is kind of a great kind of ecosystem of activism. I think that's created. Since we're nearing the time for close, any final comments? Please either drop them in the chat or or kind of raise your hand. But we will be sending it out and follow up all of the slide deck, all of the links that Mallory sent, and make sure to use all of the actions in the Free Her toolkit. Um, Seeing some shout out for the artwork in the toolkit, so appreciation for that. Since I'm not seeing hand raises or questions, but just thanks and gratitude. Can we do another final Zoom round of applause for Mallory, who was excellent and so informative this evening? Awesome. Well, thank you all. Like, thank you again, Mallory, and thank you to everybody for joining us, and thank you to everybody who is watching this on YouTube after I upload it later this evening or after. And if you're watching it on YouTube, you better follow these action steps as well. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. And with that, I will stop the